and that's taking an oath where no oath was necessary. It was a common practice to introduce a statement saying, "By thy life," or "by my head," or "may I never see the comfort of Israel if." And that is, Christ is speaking on these points. Do not swear by God, do not swear by Jerusalem, or don't swear by your head. The idea of frivolous swearing was an unnecessary form of communication, especially if using words that are sacred. Israel, God, those are sacred words. Far too often people use the most sacred language in the most meaningless ways. They take the sacred names upon their lips in the most thoughtless and irreverent way. Sacred names, in other words, should be saved for sacred things, not by swearing for nothing. The second custom is called evasive swearing. The Jews divided oaths into two classes, those which were absolutely binding and those which were not. Any oath that contained the name of the Lord was binding, and that which didn't contain the name of God was not binding. The result was that if a man swore by the name of God in any form, he would rigidly keep that oath. But if he swore by heaven or by earth or by Jerusalem or by his head, he felt quite free to break that oath. There's one great truth that could be said here. Life cannot be divided into compartments, in some of which God is present and some of which God is not present. There cannot be one kind of language in the church and another kind of language in the shipyard or the factory or the office. There can't be one standard of conduct in the church and then one standard at home. The fact is that God does not need to be invited into certain departments, into certain aspects of our lives, let's say, and be kept out of others. We sometimes we know we're doing something wrong, and we don't think of God because we'll feel judged maybe, or we will feel guilty for having done whatever it may be, that thought, that act, that deed. But God is everywhere, all through life and every activity of life. He hears not only the words which are spoken in His name, in this context, swearing to God. He hears all words. And there cannot be any such thing as a form of words which evades bringing God into a transaction. We will regard all promises as sacred. We will regard all vows we make as sacred if we remember that God is present everywhere. Pandahu paron ketapanda pliron, everywhere present and filling all things. Now my second point, the end of resentment, end of retaliation. Here we are speaking of Matthew, same chapter 5, verses 38. Here we find the characteristic ethic of Christianity, of the Christian life, and the conduct which should distinguish any Christian from a non-Christian. So Christ here in verse 38 cites the oldest law in the world, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Christ here obliterates the very principle of this law, because retaliation, however controlled and restricted, has no place in the Christian life. For the Christians, Jesus abolished the old law of vengeance and introduces the new spirit of non-resentment and of non-retaliation. And Christ gives three examples of the Christian spirit in operation. However, we can't take these examples so literally. Then we miss the point. So he continues, verse 39, "But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile with him, go 2. The first, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, we must also turn to him the left cheek. What Christ is saying here, even if a man should direct at you the most deadly and calculated insult, you must on no account retaliate, and you must on no account resent that insult. The true Christian has learned to resent no insult and to seek retaliation for no slight, for nothing. In our context, in today's context, time and time again, within every church, within everyone's life, someone is insulted, or someone feels insulted, whether that person insulted them directly or not. Because he's not invited to a certain party, because he is omitted from a vote, because in some way he does not get the place due to him or her. Let me say that again. A person's pride sometimes gets in the way, and causes them to react, and causes us to retaliate, and causes us to resent. Listen to this. The true Christian has forgotten what it is to be insulted. Let me say that again. Did you hear it? The true Christian has forgotten what it is to be insulted. He has learned to accept any insult. He or she has learned to accept any insult and never to resent it and never to seek retaliation. The second of these, of the three, is in verse 40. "And if anyone wishes to obtain judgment against you for your tunic, give him your cloak also." What Christ is saying here, the Christian never stands upon his rights. He never disputes about his legal rights. He does not consider himself to have any legal rights at all. The Christian does not think of his rights, but of his duties, not of privileges, but of responsibilities. And the third, verse 41, "And if anyone impresses you into the public service to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Hear what Christ is saying. Suppose your master comes to you, suppose someone comes to you and asks you to be a guide for someone, asks you to help someone out, whatever it may be. Don't go that 1 mile with bitterness, with resentment, but go 2 miles in joy and in cheerfulness. We often think that our liberty is to do what we want to do. Okay, that's a very good thing. We have free will. But why don't we think of that slightly different? Always think of our duty as a privilege to serve. Our liberty is our responsibility to serve people. And that's a privilege. That is this Christian ethic. So, to finish this morning's class, Christ is laying down, again, these three rules. The Christian will never resent or seek retaliation for any insult. We as people should never seek retaliation for any injury or any insult, no matter how devastating it is. Although we are only human, we are also given that great gift of Christ, who has told us how to live and not to retaliate. Second, the Christian should never stand up his legal rights or on any other right he may believe himself to possess. And thirdly, the Christian will never think of his right to do as he likes, but always of his duty to be of help. And now here's a question. How do we measure up to these 2 points that he makes? First, as I said, by swearing frivolously or by evasive swearing. And secondly, by ending the resentment and retaliation that we hold within ourselves because of our fallen humanity. How do we live up and how do we take Christ's lessons, his suggestions, his perfect world, and create it within our lives and bring it to its fulfillment as best as we can? Thank you.
Love so sweet, don't diction,